James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
Happy August 19th in the year of our Lord 2024. I'm James Gailliard. This is the James Gailliard Show right here live on Choice 92.1 FM and on all of your other outlets, YouTube, Facebook, all the things. I'm James Gailliard. I'm your host. Today's a little special because even though I'm recording this in studio, I'm actually on vacation. And so today, I still want your comments. I still want your responses, but I'm going to be playing a few interviews that I've recorded previously. Today's show on the James Gailliard Show, and for those of you that are new, and go ahead and share this with someone. For those of you that are new, we talk religion, news, politics, culture, sports, all of the things that's going to move us all toward a thriving life. One of the precepts of our show is that we want to see everyone getting to a starting line and getting across a finishing line. And so we want to talk truth to power, and we want to talk some things that will help educate us, because we believe that we're not going to be able to entertain ourselves to a better life. We're going to have to educate ourselves to a better life. And so today, I want to focus on the 10 Council of State races in North Carolina. I really want to just introduce these. We talked about these in a previous show, but I want to make sure that we're focusing on them. There's been a lot of focus on my show and everywhere else, and rightfully so, on the presidential race. But there are also a lot of other important races on our ballot here in North Carolina. But today I want us to make sure we're clear about these Council of State races. And so I printed out something real quick just so I could stay on track. We're clear about the gubernatorial race. We're clear about the governor's race. That's current Attorney General Josh Stein matching up on the Democratic side, matching up against Mark Robinson, who is the current lieutenant governor, and he's the Republican candidate. So that's our gubernatorial race. Then next after that on your ballot, you're going to see the Attorney General race. The Attorney General race on the Democrat side is Jeff Jackson, and I'm going to weigh in on all of these races over the next couple months. On the Democrat side, it's Dan Bishop. Now, let's get into some of the ones we talk about even less. One is State Treasurer, current state representative and a UNC professor, Wesley Harris. This guy has like a PhD in economics, super smart. He was our nerd in the General Assembly. Good friend, good guy. Wesley Harris is the Democratic nominee for state treasurer, and David Briner is the Republican. Michelle Morrow, let's move on to State Superintendent of Public Instruction. State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Michelle Morrow, go figure, on the Republican side, won that primary. That's the craziest thing, because I say that because she's just anti-public education. I mean, and she's proven that. On the Democratic side, Mo Green is the candidate. And then for Lieutenant Governor, you have current Senator Rachel Hunt, who also served 2 terms in the State House, and is the daughter of Jim Hunt, who was the governor here in North Carolina for 4 terms. She's matched up against Hal Weatherman, who is on the Republican side. Then you have Commissioner of Insurance. Currently, Commissioner of Insurance, the incumbent is Mike Causey, and he also won his primary reelection, so he's matching up against current State Senator Natasha Marcus on the Democratic side. Natasha's great. I served with her in the General Assembly. I'll be introducing that race to you. And over the next couple months, I'll have almost all of these candidates on the show. And then you have Braxton Winston, young brother who was former mayor pro tem in Charlotte. He is the Democratic candidate for labor commissioner, and he is matching up against Luke Farley. And so that's going to be a very interesting race. We have more African Americans on ballot for these Council of State races than I've seen in a long time. So I'm excited about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then you have Secretary of State, Elaine Marshall. I think she's like eight terms. It's a long time. She's been in that seat forever. She's awesome. So she's once again running. I think Elaine Marshall probably gets more votes than anybody on the ballot, maybe other than the ag commissioner. So Elaine Marshall is running against, Chad Brown on the Republican side is running against Elaine Marshall for Secretary of State. So I want us familiar. I'm going to talk in future shows about what all of these races mean and what these people do and all of that. Then you have State Auditor. As y'all probably remember, Beth Wood resigned in somewhat of a controversy. When she resigned, the governor appointed a young attorney, political operative, brilliant mind in the person of Jessica Holmes, who is now serving as state auditor. And she is running against a Republican by the name of Jack Clark. I believe it's Jack Clark. And I'm going to talk more about that race. I'm going to bring Jessica in to talk about the state auditor and the importance of that. And then you have the Commissioner of Agriculture. Currently, that commissioner is Steve Troxler on the Republican side, and he is running against Sarah Tabor, the Democrat. So those are our 10 races, right? And so I want us mindful of those races and what's and who these people are and what these roles do in our state. Today, I have a pre-recorded interview with Maurice Green, who is the Democratic nominee for Superintendent of Public Instruction. Outstanding guy, Duke-trained attorney, has been a school superintendent, has been chief counsel for one of the largest school systems, and you'll hear about all of that. So I'm about to pass it on so you can see this interview with Mo Green. Now, what I want you to do is I still want you to comment. I still want you to tell me who would you like me to interview and what would you like me talking about? Those are the two questions today. Who would you like me interviewing? And secondly, what would you like me talking about? And let me give you a third question. If you were interviewing Mo Green, or I'm going to also introduce another pre-recorded interview, what questions did I not ask that you wish I had asked so that I can make sure those questions get answered, okay? Who would you like to see me interview? What would you like me talking about? And what questions did I miss? So what we're going to do today is you're about to see a pre-recorded interview between myself and Mo Green, who is running for the Democratic nomination, or the state nomination on the Democratic Party for a Superintendent of Public Instruction. After that, we're going to take a break. Then when we come back from the break, we're going to see a pre-recorded segment in studio with me and the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Jaime Harrison. And then we'll take another break, and then we'll finish up with one more interview. Now, this was a Zoom pre-recorded this week. You got to bear with me. I was in a van, and I was moving my oldest daughter back to UNC Chapel Hill, Jasmine, for her senior year. My son Matthew was driving the van, and I was holding the phone up doing this second interview again with Democratic National Committee Chairman Jaime Harrison. So that's the show today. Pre-recorded interviews with Mo Green, and then Democratic National Committee Chair Jaime Harrison, and then a Zoom call from this past Tuesday while I was riding to Chapel Hill to move my daughter in, again with Jaime Harrison. Put your comments in, share this. Can't wait to be back live with you next week. I'm just on a vacation week. Love y'all. Check out the interview. Well, this is James Gailliard. Welcome to In Black and White. Another episode today. And today we're going to talk public education, particularly in North Carolina. I am thrilled to have in studios with me, I think, one of the greatest minds we have right now in public education in North Carolina. And that is in the person of Maurice Mo Green. Mo, welcome.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here this morning.
Man, I'm so glad you're with us. I want to jump right into it. Your background is impressive.
Thank you.
But I want to know, so introduce yourself to the people. I mean, I know you. I've read up on you. You're running for superintendent of our North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. But tell us who you are and tell us why you're running.
Yes, sir. So I'll start with a little bit of a professional background. I also want to lift up family and then why I'm running. So professionally, after completing law school, I did a clerkship and then went to a law firm. And then ultimately that law firm was actually representing the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. And I ultimately became one of the lawyers that represented them and then became the lawyer as general counsel for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. From there, I became the deputy superintendent for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board. And then from there was blessed and honored to become the superintendent of Guilford County Schools, which is the third largest school district in the state. Okay. Was there for 7 years, and we tried to make some tremendous difference there. We utilized a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to structure the way we worked, and it was called Intelligence Plus Character. That's the goal of true education.
Nice.
From there, left in 2016 to become the executive director for the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, which is a foundation that focuses solely on North Carolina, but all of North Carolina, and provides significant funding for public education. So that's a little bit about professional.
Yep.
And then a little bit about personal. I was able to meet and marry my beautiful wife, Stephanie, at Duke University. We have 2 adult children. My son is 23 and my daughter is 27. I'm so proud of both of them as well. They are also public school graduates as well.
That's good stuff. So why are you running?
So why am I running? I am at a place where I believe that the North Carolina public school system is being dismantled brick by precious brick. In so many ways, and in so many instances. The thing that probably got me to the place of saying maybe I need to lend my voice in a different way is it was a bill at the time that became legislation to expand a private school voucher program. This is a program where public dollars that are so desperately needed in public education are going to private schools.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, it will be now going for folk who already have made their wonderful choice to send their child to private school, can afford to do it.
Right.
Meanwhile, we have students in our public school system that desperately need that money. And I said, yeah, if we're not careful, we'll always have a public school system.
Right.
There'll be something.
Right.
But it won't be good.
Yeah.
And I can't sit on the sidelines and let that happen.
Well, let me thank you for not sitting on the sideline, first of all. As you know, I have run several times. I've served a couple terms in the North Carolina General Assembly. I always sat on K-12 and usually community college and four-year college committees because of my passion for education. Really appreciative that you're running. I'm grateful that a person that's qualified to run is running.
Thank you.
I don't mean that in a derogatory way about other people that are running, but oftentimes we don't have people that are most qualified running in office. And because it is such a sacrifice for family, our time, all of that, we share something in the sense that my wife is also a Duke alum.
That's right.
And so I didn't meet her at Duke, but she's also a double Dookie. She did her undergrad. She's actually an engineer and did her engineering program and then her MBA there. And so glad to have you. I want to, and I share your concern on opportunity, what they call opportunity scholarships. You know, it's always made to sound very attractive, right? But the reality of it is when you dig into the weeds of the bill, you're like, this is such bad news. And the most recent session where they just moved limitations on income. So now you have people who could pay for it anyway, you know, getting tax dollars and then the lack of accountability. I don't like the terminology, Mo, and the reason I don't is because people call it school choice, right? And the struggle I have with that is that when you look at setting up two systems parallel to one another, one system, you're giving every tool to succeed.
That's right.
Funding, flexibility.
That's right.
I mean, you know this from being a former superintendent. I was shocked when I got to the General Assembly how much fight went into school calendar flexibility. Like, I was amazed that the coast or the mountains really dictated the lack of school. So, like, Nash County couldn't get a school calendar flexibility because the mountains or the coast wanted to make sure students were there at a certain time to be able to work those businesses. And it was mind-boggling to me, like, how landlocked it was. And so my struggle is we set up these parallel systems. One is our traditional K-12 system where we don't give flexibility, where we don't fund properly, where we don't provide proper support services and systems. The other is we say, hey, be as flexible as you want, kind of do your own thing. We won't even hold you accountable. And then we call it choice. So if I'm a single mom, I'm trying to I want my child to have the opportunity I didn't have. And here's one school over here that I may be able to get them in, and it's going to be some extra scholarship dollars attached. And they've got a fully staffed teacher pool. And here's my local elementary school that, doesn't have all those things.
That's right.
If I'm that mom really hoping for a shot for my child,
That's right.
she doesn't have a choice.
That's right.
We're kind of pushing her in a certain direction.
That's right.
And that concerns me. I think, Mo, I'd love to get your perspective on this. It feels like we are segregating schools all over again.
Yeah, so I think you've got a lot in there. And I certainly think that what will ultimately happen if we're not careful is, in fact, just that. I want to speak about the funding for a moment.
Yeah.
I want to speak a little bit about the public schools. The funding. So as I shared in my professional background, Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, Guilford County schools, Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. I've been with a case called the Leandro litigation for 20 plus years. I was a lawyer in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools when the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools were saying, look, we need additional funds as well because there are many economically disadvantaged students who are in our school districts as well, the larger school districts. The lawsuit was initially brought by the low wealth, some of the low wealth districts in the state. Well, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools where people think, well, you've got all this resource. That's absolutely not the case. So then moved to Guilford County schools and actually appeared before Judge Manning, who was a trial court judge who supervised the litigation. And then with the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation funded the low wealth plaintiffs and then funded a report, an independent report that was commissioned that the court relied on to say that billions of additional dollars are due into our public schools, billions. And so at the same time then that the General Assembly says, we're going to now ratchet it up to $500 million going to private schools. And so when you break that down, now you begin to see exactly what you said. This is a false choice. It's a false choice. Now, having said that, I want to speak to and on behalf of public schools. There are amazing things going on in our public schools. And that is in spite of the fact that they're underfunded. In fact, you can go online and Google this. There's information that will clearly show that if you look at the demographics of our kids in North Carolina and make those sort of the same as in every other state,
Okay.
our teachers and educators on what's called the Nation's Report Card are actually putting our kids in the top tiers of how our kids are performing. Despite the fact that we are in the bottom tier in funding. So sit with that for a moment. I've told us that we are billions of dollars short of what's necessary. Yet our educators are doing these remarkable things with the little bit that they have. And so what happens, I think, is if we get on board with paying what we ought pay for our public schools, our educators will deliver. Let me talk a little bit about what happens in Guilford County, just because I have some experience there. And I want to lift up because, oftentimes we think about who's at the bottom and who gets educated well, and it's often African-American males. And in Guilford County, we had a school that at one point had about 41% of its kids performing on grade level on end of course examinations. I had a brand new principal go there, and I visited a school. He's written a book about this, so I'm just not making this up. He said, when I visited, I said, I don't see much going on here. And he said, Mo, in that book, he said, we got to really raise expectations because this superintendent is about excellence. What that school did, with much support from central office and others and parents and students and educators in that building, took a school from there to having over 90% of the students performing on grade level on the end of grade exams, had 100% graduation rates, had 100% kids getting accepted to college.
Wow.
All male, almost 100% African-American male. And they did this not for 1 year and say, wow, you got it done for, no, this is year after year after year. This can be done.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, are we going to lean in to number one, excellence, or are we going to fund what we can to make excellence occur in each of our school buildings, not just those oases, if you will, of where there are good things going on.
That's a great story. I have a statement, a follow-up question for you on that. Because one of my frustrations when I was in the General Assembly mode was that we did not fund what was working, to your point. For me, the early college system is a good example of that. I've seen them be very successful. I've seen these innovative kind of schools that wind up in they start off low-performing status, but they give them the ability to innovate, the ability to be creative. I've seen it in Edgecombe County when Valerie Bridges was superintendent there, and how they were making a turnaround. So that's been a frustration for me because it's almost like there's not the will in the General Assembly, at least currently, to help successful schools to be replicated and duplicated. But because I think you're right, I think they can be. What if you had to identify, though, using that school you were referencing in Guilford County, what were some of the things that made it, you think, so successful?
Yeah. So, and first of all, Valerie Bridges was a principal in Guilford County Schools when I was superintendent.
Oh, okay.
And she was actually the principal for my son's school. Okay. So, strong supporter and believer in Valerie Bridges and what she was able to do in Guilford, and then what she was able to do when she became superintendent. There are some ingredients that I think are critically important for a school to become a school of excellence. The first one, though, starts with expectations. You have got to set the bar exceedingly high. And so when I say that we want to be about excellence, because most people think, well, if we can just get a little incrementally better, that's good. We are disadvantaging our kids because our kids, when you set the expectation for the adults in the building at an exceedingly high level, the kids will rise to that. They're gonna do whatever the adults allow for them to do and follow. So that's one. Two, you've got to be willing to hire well and be willing to say, everyone gets the chance to rise to the level. I coach you up, but sometimes we're going to have to remove you out. Because if you're not about excellence, then this isn't going to be the school for you.
Yep.
Three, I think you have to be masters of your craft. And so educators are, in many instances, masters. Sometimes they get in situations where they don't sort of reveal that. Yeah. And so if you set the expectations high, you hire well, and then say, now do what you do. It can happen. Yeah. You got to have funding. Yeah, so you see, I don't start off with funding.
Right.
But funding is critically necessary for recruiting and retaining, the kind of staff that you want, providing the sort of resources necessary to have kids get what they need, to provide the supports around kids, because some kids, quite honestly, are coming from situations that You just don't walk in and say, okay, here's the class, here's the books, let's get to work.
Right.
They are dealing with community issues that require a lot of additional support. We have to find the resources to provide those supports to those students. Yeah, those, and the principal at the school, Eric Hines, he talks about his 7 ingredients. I've picked out a few that I think, I think are critically important to that level of success.
So let me kind of challenge you a little bit on this. I sat, when I was in the General Assembly, Governor Cooper had a task force called the DRIVE Task Force, Representative Inclusive Vision for Education. I'm amazed. Now I'm from Philadelphia, so I was educated in Philadelphia public schools, but I was in 7th grade before I had my first white teacher. I speak to many students now at my church. We have a huge K-12 population. Many of them are in middle school and have yet to see a black teacher. What are your thoughts about how we create a more diverse environment and attract more African Americans, Latino Americans into our classrooms?
Yes. So, first of all, this is a dire situation, I think, in North Carolina, as it is across the country, where many of our school districts and schools are taught mostly by whites and white women. And there's no disrespect to them, because I actually think that many of them do a remarkable job and try to understand the students who end up before them.
Sure.
Which in North Carolina is becoming increasingly, in fact, majority students of color.
Right.
We need more educators of color to be in our schools. There was a time that they were there, and we have systematically found ways to put them away. And so my appeal would be, there are any number of things that I think strategically one has to do and can do. But the first thing I think we have to do is recognizing that at this moment, North Carolina doesn't want to pay teachers what they ought to be paid. And so I recognize and appreciate that those in black and brown folk who could make the choices of where they want to go to work are not going to choose schools. I need you to choose schools.
Yeah.
It's that. And then let's figure out together how we elevate the pay and the compensation. We'll work together to do that. But I need you first to say, I'm going to choose to be an educator.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that I have started trying to float is the following. And I think I floated it first. I want to float it first with a focus on HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. That whatever degree you get a teacher license along with it. Whatever you do, chemistry major, business major, whatever that happens to be, I want you to get a teacher license along with that. Because what I think we'll start to do is we'll start to generate folk who will say, I'm willing to take that step. And maybe I'm only going to do it for a couple of years. And then I always tell folk, you give me a couple of years in our schools and I'll get you for long. It's now incumbent on me to figure out how I keep you there.
Right.
As a superintendent or a leader of a school district or, a principal. So that's part of how, so first I think we've got to have a mindset that says, okay, and so why am I going to do that? And I'm like, Mo, I hear you, but why? Our kids need you. I mean, I don't know how to say it any clearer. Our kids need you. They need the kind of folk who are going to understand them well and are not going to let them slip and slide.
Yep.
the best educators, so I had a different sort of growing up experience. I actually went to a private school when I was born and started going to school in New York.
Okay.
And so I had all African-American educators.
Okay.
And then moved to Georgia, and then you're like, where? Can't find them very often. Not that they weren't there. We definitely had some, but not to that same level. So I sort of had this sense early on of how magnificent it is to see folk who look like me carrying on like they know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah.
And are pouring into you all that you need to be and do well, and didn't let you slip and slide.
Yeah, man, look, I won't do it on this show, but I have a story of how my 6th grade teacher saved my life.
Yes.
And I still am in contact with her to this day.
Yeah.
And so I know the value. And I had great parents at home, but they didn't understand the educational system. Yeah. You know, I grew up with my parents, but my parents would say to me, my dad, he would say, son, education is a type of salvation. Mm-hmm. It can get you to heaven, but it can sure make getting around earth a whole lot easier.
There you go.
And we kind of held on to that. So, listen, we got to wrap up. This is James Gailliard. I'm in studio with Maurice Green, who is running for Superintendent of North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Y'all, he is my guy. I'm excited about his candidacy. I'm hoping and praying and believing he's going to be our next state superintendent. Early voting starts on February 15th. Election day is March 5th. So we're winding down. And it's not just his race. There's a whole bunch of other races that we need to care about. Mo, if people if they want to support you, if they want to know more about your campaign, if they want to reach you, how do they do all that? And then I'm going to give you the last word for the audience.
Excellent. Very good. So they reach me through Mo Green, MOGREEN, 4FORNC.com. That's my website. And then on that, you can find out more about me. You can find out how to contact me. If you have questions that say, well, Mo, I ain't fully on board with you yet, you just put that. There's a place where you can, there's something that we call Mo Wants to Know on our website. This is something I did when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools, that when I was at Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. I listen first, I learn, and then I try to lead in the way that I try to lead. And so if there's something that you like on Mo, I need to explore this with you, you put that right in there. Now, there are other things you can do. You can certainly join the team. You can volunteer. And I'm learning that to run and win statewide takes money.
Yes, sir.
And so I also need those dollars to make this happen if you want Mo to be the next superintendent of public instruction in North Carolina.
Well, look, that's awesome. Thank you for running. Thank you for your willingness to run. Folks, y'all have heard him. This is Maurice Green, hoping to be our next state superintendent of public instruction for the state of North Carolina. You know how to reach him. And I want you to begin thinking about the value of public education. Listen, you may be listening to this and you may be 70 years old. And you're like, well, you know, my children are up and gone, but somebody's going to need to take care of you when you get to the hospital. Somebody's going to need to bring those groceries out to your car. Somebody's going to need to deliver something to your house. We all need the workforce that comes out of our schools in North Carolina. And because our 4-year college and 2-year college system are so extraordinary, we need great feeder systems into those school systems. So again, this is James Gailliard here with Maurice Green. Thank you for listening and watching in black and white. Thanks, Mo.
Thank you.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
Well, everybody, welcome. This is James Gailliard. Welcome to the James Gailliard Show. And as promised, talking politics, culture, religion, all the stuff they tell us not to talk about because we can't afford to educate ourselves and to entertain ourselves into a better life. We got to educate ourselves to a better life. So in studio, right in Rocky Mount, is the chairman himself, chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Jaime Harrison. Jaime, welcome.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you so much for having me. Really, really excited about being on the show with you and excited about being in North Carolina, which is a battleground state. So folks in North Carolina, you need to understand the power that you have right now to really transform this nation. The eyes of the entire country, no, the eyes of the world are going to be what happens here in North Carolina. So that's a lot of power, y'all. Make sure you use it.
Man, it's a great way to start off. We may have some folk that are not familiar with the Democratic National.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are.
So I'm the chair of the Democratic National Committee, and some of you may remember my name because I ran for the Senate in South Carolina 4 years ago against Lindsey Graham. I know a lot of North Carolina people sent me contributions and saw my ads. But after I was not successful, but President Biden was successful, he called me the night of the election, and he said, Jaime, I saw your race, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the race that you ran. He said, now if, because it wasn't certain yet that he was going to be president, he said, now if the election goes the way that we think is going, I'm going to have a spot for you somewhere, in my team. And so he won. And then shortly thereafter, I get a call that he wanted me to serve as the chair of the Democratic National Committee. And the Democratic National Committee is the organization that's been around for 176 years that oversees the Democratic Party. We got a lot of state parties, North Carolina Democratic Party, South Carolina Democratic Party, and we coordinate with all of those state parties, but we also help to run the presidential elections process. So
Gotcha.
Debates, primaries, and what have you. And so President Biden was the very first president to name a black person to be chair of the DNC.
Wow.
Now, I'm the third black person to serve as chair of the DNC. They ran in elections when we didn't have a president.
Okay.
But this is the very first time that a president nominated a black person to run the Democratic National Committee. But, that's who Joe Biden is. First person to put a black woman as vice president of the United States. First person to put a black woman on the United States Supreme Court. Just recently, we just announced that there have been over 200 judges that Joe Biden has appointed. 58 of them have been black.
Wow.
Right? So this is a man who has seen folks in our community hear about the struggles and the obstacles that we face, and is doing something in order to fundamentally change that.
Man, I'm so glad you raised that. I just finished reading about the appellate courts and the appointments, and it's extraordinary. And what baffles me, Jaime, is I can't recall a president with a more successful term than Joe Biden.
Not in my lifetime.
And so what do we need to do to better communicate? Because you would think his ratings would be 80%.
Yeah.
Right? Because the term has been that good.
It's been that good. I mean, think about the money that is coming here to North Carolina. $9.8 billion in terms of infrastructure into the state of North Carolina. That's roads, bridges, water, broadband. Many of our communities have been disconnected from the rest of the world. No broadband. Joe Biden did that. Donald Trump talked about filling the pothole, everything else. He's going to have infrastructure week every week. Never filled the pothole.
Right.
But Joe Biden got that done in the first year. Dropped the cost of insulin down to $35 a month. Money to the historically black colleges and universities. $16 billion. That's with a B, y'all.
Yeah.
$16 billion for HBCUs. We look at the student loan debt, $137 billion in terms of student loan debt relief for almost 5 million people, many of them black. I mean, listen, I had $160,000 of debt. Now I still paying mine off, but there are a lot of brothers and sisters who've gotten that, who've been paying for over 20 years, and now it was because of Joe Biden, the first president to ever do this, to say, you know what? You paid enough. It's time for you to now move on and do more for your family and your friends and your community. And so it's about getting that information out. We can't trust mainstream media to get it out, to be quite honest, because they're too busy talking about whether or not Joe Biden has on athletic shoes today instead of focusing on the resources that are flowing into our community in a historic rate.
Yeah.
One like we have never seen before. I will go to my grave saying that Joe Biden has been one of the most historic and transformative presidents of my lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's not exaggerations. It's just looking at numbers.
That's exactly right. I'm a data guy, and I couldn't agree more. And so, hey, this is James Gailliard. You're listening to the James Gailliard Show. I am with Chairman Jaime Harrison of the Democratic National Committee. Listen, let me ask you this. Our show goes all the way to Raleigh, Durham, but we have a lot of rural listeners.
Yes.
I'm very passionate about three groups of communities, Jaime. One is the rural community. One is rural and one is black.
Yes.
And the third is faith. Yep. So I'm always trying to weave in those three communities. What would you say should be our strategy? What would you say to us about engaging rural voters? How do we do a better job of shrinking that rural-urban divide and making sure rural voters really understand the value of this election and why they should be voting for President Joe Biden?
One of the things that has bothered me in politics, and I've been doing this now since I was 16 years old, and it used to be that the Democratic Party was the party of rural America. Mm-hmm. We still are the sole party that delivers the most for rural America, but no longer do rural America look at members of those communities look at us as their party representing them. So we got to get back into those communities. I consider myself a dirt road Democrat. I grew up off of dirt road. Okay. So I know about, being out in fields and getting different stuff. My grandma picked cotton. My grandfather worked at a dairy, for a little while. So that's the stock that I come from. So I understand that rural life. It's important for them to understand that they got people fighting for them every day. Just that broadband issue alone is going to be big for rural America. Because right now, the president talks about it. When you got to take your kids to a McDonald's and sit in the parking lot so they can do their homework because there's no connection. And what COVID showed us was how rural communities lack the infrastructure. Many of our rural hospitals have closed because of the lack of Medicaid expansion, but also the lack of infrastructure, because telehealth is so important. But you can't do telehealth if you're not connected, right? So it's important that we not cede any territory to Republicans, that we go into rural communities so that they understand the things that we have done in order to improve their lives. The investments that we have made in terms of farming, the investments that we've made in terms of creating new economies, putting infrastructure in the ground. So many of I'm from South Carolina. So many of our rural mayors told me that, Jaime, our infrastructure is falling apart. It's 60, 70, 80 years old. Pipes are breaking down and everything else, and we need that investment. Well, they are getting that investment from Joe Biden. Again, over 500 projects that are on the way. Roads, bridges, water pipes, internet here in North Carolina. That is only because of one reason, right? Two reasons. One, 80 million of us, including a lot of people here in North Carolina, went to the polls in 2020 and cast a ballot for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Right. And two, so that was they made a promise to us that they were going to change things and do things, but they kept that promise once they got there. And they put over $1 trillion into the infrastructure in this nation. And they made sure that particularly in black communities and communities that have been historically left out, that there's set-asides, there are programs that are specifically targeted to those communities that have been left out of the investments in infrastructure. That is because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Now, folks, the president says it often, we just need to finish the job. That's right. There's still more to do. We're not saying that everything's done, everything's perfect. We got to finish the job, but we also need help. We need to make sure that, Congressman Davis is sent back to Congress. We need to make sure that we win the governorship here in North Carolina. Right. We need to make sure that we have Democrats in control of the Senate and the House. We need to break up what's going on in the legislature here in North Carolina so that you bring some sanity back and that the governor actually has some people who can work with.
That's right.
And so that's what's all at stake. And the power to do all of that, voters have it.
That's it.
Right?
Yes, that's it.
It's no magical thing. Voters have it.
That's exactly
Either we use it or we don't.
That's right.
One of the things that Dr. King said that lives with me, this is a quote from a letter from a Birmingham jail. He said, "We will repent not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people."
That's right.
And when we sit on our hands and not go vote, that is being silent. That is not speaking with the most powerful tool that we have, and that is our right to vote.
That's right.
And so it's important that we don't be silent, that we stand up, that we stick up for the things that we believe in, and that we invest and vote for folks who actually think about us, who actually are working and fighting for us.
That's right.
And I can tell you, every morning when Joe Biden gets up, he's thinking about how to make life better for all of America. Every day when Donald Trump gets up, He thinks about the retribution and payback that he's going to give to people who he considers political enemies. That is what this contest is all about. Hope versus fear, progress versus chaos. And we got to determine where we want to go.
Man, look, I'm a pastor, so I'm ready to lift an offering. I'm going to say amen to everything you say and lift an offering. So before I let you go, Chairman, personalize this a little bit for just our listeners. Tell us, the Jaime Harrison that's in front of me right now, who were the people, who was the person that really influenced you? Who are the people that influence you around public service, around the man you are, around the character you have? Just tell us about that.
Well, you know, every election season, I think back to my grandfather. So my mom was a teen when she had me. She was 16 years old, dropped out of school. And my grandparents, my grandfather and my grandmother, really took care of me. My grandfather had a 4th grade education, and he, like I said, he worked at a dairy for a while. He paved roads. My grandmother had an 8th grade education. She picked cotton and she cleaned houses. And so one of the traditions that my grandfather and I established when I turned 18 was that we would go vote together. One of the last things that I did with my grandfather before he passed away in 2004 was actually vote. That was the year in which I graduated from law school, came back home to South Carolina to help run a Senate race. My grandfathers and my grandparents were living in a neighborhood that had a lot of crime, and so I actually bought them a house. My grandfather was a diabetic at the time. He had amputations, and so he was in a wheelchair. And so I went to their new house, drove up, picked him up, got him in the car. We went and voted, and then we came back home and sat out on the porch. That's his thing. He loved to sit on that porch. And I remember sitting there, and he said to me, he grabbed my arm and he said, "Baldy." So that, you know, we got nicknames in the South. Right. And I tell anybody, he was the only one that could call me Baldy. But he said, "Baldy, you know what we did today?" I said, "Yes, sir. We went to vote." And he said, "Yep." He said, "Son, you know, I couldn't always vote." I said, "Yes, sir, I know." He said, "You know, in this state, they didn't always consider me a whole man." I said, "Yes, sir, I know that too." He said, "Let me tell you something, son. You never let anybody tell you that you don't matter. You never let anybody tell you you don't count." And that has lived with me all of my life, because so many people, like my grandparents, feel as though society is saying that they don't matter, that they don't count. And it's always been my job to stand up and be a voice for folks like that. People who will be seen as simple and not having a lot of value by larger society, but are so strong and so valuable in terms of the things that they represent and who they are. And so my grandparents made me into the man that I am.
Wow.
And when I go all across this country, we just went from South Carolina to DC to Alaska to Nevada to Chicago, and now we're here in North Carolina. The reason why I do that is not because of the money, it's not because of the fame, but it's because I think about people like my grandparents that are in all of these communities who are looking for folks to represent them. Joe Biden's fighting for those people. I know Donald Trump is not. And so I'm going to be in the president's corner because he's always been in our corner. And he's always standing up for people like my grandparents. And that's why I'm standing up for him.
Family, this has been a great interview with Chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Jaime Harrison. You're listening to the James Gailliard Show, and he just told you exactly why we need to re-elect Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris, and why we need to elect Democrats up and down the ballot here in North Carolina. Commissioner, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you, Pastor.
And thank you for being in North Carolina.
I appreciate it. And listen, I'm coming back a lot. Y'all's barbecue is good. Not South Carolina, but it's still good.
We're going to talk about that on another show. We'll be right back. We're going to go pay some bills.
Thank you, Pastor.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
Okay, well, let's do it. So, hey, everybody, this is James Gailliard. Welcome back to the James Gailliard Show. I have the chairman of the Democratic National Committee with me, Jaime Harrison. He is a friend. I love his work. I love what he does for our party. Welcome back to North Carolina, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor. It's such a great opportunity to be back with you. And, you know, things are very different now since the last time I was with you in terms of our party and the momentum that we have moving forward into this election?
You know, I was watching the very first rally in Philadelphia. Now, you know, I'm a Baptist preacher, and we believe in call and response. I'm sitting in my office at the church, and the vice president and the new vice presidential candidate nominee were speaking. I literally stood up in my office while they were speaking because it was that much energy. So it is so awesome to see.
Well, Pastor, I mean, I had the opportunity of opening up that rally and opening up the rally in Detroit. And I can tell you the enthusiasm on the ground, the enthusiasm in those arenas, absolutely electric. I mean, people were happy. They were singing, they were dancing, they were hugging each other. I mean, people are just so excited about this ticket and this new momentum that we have within the party, particularly behind Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I like to call them our warriors of hope and joy, because that's what they're bringing to this debate and to this campaign. And so as we go into the convention in Chicago in just a few days, you know, if those rallies were at the top, we're going to blow the roof off at the United Center in Chicago.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm so excited about this, Chairman. For those of you who are just joining, this is James Gailliard. I'm with Chairman Jaime Harrison of Democratic National Committee. I'm so grateful that you're with us. Pardon my movement, y'all. I'm moving my daughter back into UNC Chapel Hill for her senior year. Chairman, I've been seeing bumps in the polls, as I know you have. All of the swing states that we were struggling to be competitive in, we are now either competitive or winning. What do you feel about the momentum that we have, particularly in some of our swing states?
Tremendous momentum, and particularly I see it in a place like North Carolina. I want to put folks on notice. I said this when I was with you a few months ago, and I'm going to say it now. We are going to win North Carolina. We are going to win North Carolina. We right now, Pastor, we have 20 offices open across the state. We're going to add a few more in the coming weeks. We have nearly 150 staffers on the ground already. We're going to add more there. We just signed up 12,000 new volunteers, have signed up to volunteer in North Carolina alone. Voter registrations are going up. So everything is lining up and is in place. We can win North Carolina, and we will win North Carolina. But what we need folks to do is don't sit on your hands. Don't just sit back and watch other people do the work. We all have to, all hands on deck. We all have to do the work to transform that state, to transform this nation into what we want. But we're seeing that same type of momentum in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Arizona, in Georgia, in Nevada. I see it even in places like Florida. Like, we can't give up. We need to all hands on deck. Let's push and see how many states we can flip, how many states we can win, how many folks, not just on the top of ticket, but on the bottom ticket, that we can bring along in this victory.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I agree with you. We are going to win North Carolina. I'm very excited about the momentum that I'm seeing. I love these affinity groups. I was on North Carolina Faith Leaders call last night. While I'm on the North Carolina Faith Leaders call, I get a text to join the Christians for Kamala call. And then we've got all of these great affinity groups. And I'm wondering, was this a deliberate strategy of the campaign, or because it feels very organic to me, Chairman? So tell us a little bit about these affinity group formations, if you could.
Well, it is. This is when, this is the power of the grassroots. Of course, we've always had affinity groups within the campaign, but these calls are all organic. Grassroots organizers pulling together. And it started off with Black women. Joteka Edie, who is from South Carolina, one of my homegirls, who is a fantastic leader, leads this Black women call every Sunday. She put this initial call together. They had, thousands of folks that got on. They raised over $1 million and so odd dollars just off of one call. And then the Black men call took place. And then after that, the white women, and then the white men, and it was like a a snowball rolling downhill, and it just continued to collect momentum and steam. And now we're seeing all of these various affinity groups. And I've never seen anything like this in a campaign. I mean, even the Obama campaign, which people look at as the model of grassroots organizing and moving forward, I really think that we are setting a new standard for how campaigns move from this point forward. And it's fueled and powered by the grassroots and that enthusiasm that they have to see change and to fight for our freedoms.
Well, amen to that. And I'm excited to see it, excited to be a part of it. Do you have any parting words for us in North Carolina as you jump on your next call?
Yes. So, folks, make sure you check your voter registration status. Go to iwillvote.com. iwillvote.com. Check your status. Get your friends and family members to check their status to make sure that you are current in terms of your voter registration. And when you then decide to go and vote and you actually cast your ballot, if you run into any issues or problems, go to iwillvote.com, and there's a hotline there specifically targeted for you in your state. If you run into any issues, we got lawyers on the ready at the DNC that are ready to help you get through any issue or obstacle. We know that the Republicans, the only way that they win is to keep people from coming to the polls. We want to make sure that you get an opportunity to have your voice be heard. So go to iwillvote.com. Make sure that your registration is up to date. Check your friends and family as well. And then if you run into issues, give us a call and we'll be right there to help you iron them out.
Well, folks, you have heard it from the chairman himself, Chairman Jaime Harrison. Thank you for coming back to the James Gailliard Show. Thank you for joining us on Choice 92.1 FM. And I'm sure we're going to talk again before Election Day. So safe travels, best wishes, and thanks for all you do.
Same to you, Pastor, and congratulations to your daughter for a senior year.
Look, congratulations to both of us, right?
Okay.
Take care, Chairman.
Take care.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.